Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about the Tenants Fee Ban. This has been brought in very recently on the 1st of June 2019 by the UK government, and it affects tenants applying for property in the private rented sector. If I can take you back to the days before this act, but in the recent revival of the rental sector in the UK, there was a time when it was considered fair for tenants and landlords to share the cost of both the tenancy document and the inventory work involving a check-in and check-out. Fair because both parties are going to, or were going to, benefit from a very well defined and constructed tenancy document, and both parties were going to benefit from a comprehensive inventory and schedule of condition. And that's why originally landlords and tenants shared the cost of both of those items. More recently, unfortunately, some letting agents have stepped up the price of these services. They've included the words administration fee, and the cost of the work as invoiced to the tenants has become far greater and out of all proportion, in my view, to the work carried out. Therefore, the government have taken action in order to bring the matter back into a better balance, even if that balance is rather too much against the landlord and his agent now, and too much in favour of the tenant. Now, there are three things that were previously, until the 1st of June this year, chargeable to the tenant. One was the cost of taking up references. The second was preparation of the tenancy agreement, which was, to be fair, shared between both parties, but probably more expensive for the tenant. And thirdly, the cost of the inventory make, the check-in and the check-out. Now, what's changed is that those three things can no longer be charged to the tenant. So the agent either has to absorb the cost or pass all of it or some of it onto the landlord. So it's not good news for landlords or agents. Now, tenants obviously expect to pay monies when they move into a property, and they will of course continue to pay rent. This is made very clear. The following list is very clear in the Act. They will not only pay rent, they will pay for the utilities. So that's water, electricity and gas, if there is any, council tax, television licence if they watch TV, and telecoms such as broadband if that's what they would like to have available. They will also expect to pay for interest on any rent that's late in being paid. This will be specified in the tenancy document. They will be responsible for the cost of buying a new set of keys and changing the locks if they lose the keys, or if they lock themselves out, they will have to pay for a locksmith to come and let them in again. And it's not only the keys, but it's any security fobs or devices that relate to that property. The tenancy will also specify expenses that a tenant may be liable to pay during the course of the tenancy if things happen, things get broken and need to be repaired, and only if they can be reasonably attributed to the tenant and it's agreed that they are the tenant's responsibility, will those costs be paid as well. So, those are the payments that a tenant can still expect to make at the beginning of a tenancy, irrespective of the new Act. There are, of course, deposits that are paid by an applicant. At the beginning, one is called the holding deposit, which reserves the property whilst references are taken up, and the second is the security deposit. Now, the holding deposit has always been and will remain equivalent to 1 week's rent. That will only be retained by the agent on behalf of the landlord in future if there proves to have been false information given by the applicant at the beginning of the process, which is proven to be false once the references come back. Secondly, if the applicant fails the right to rent check, then the holding deposit is forfeited. If they decide not to proceed with the tenancy and do not sign the documents within 15 days of their offer being accepted, then again that deposit will be forfeited and retained by the agent on behalf of the landlord. If the documents are not signed within 15 days, then again the application lapses and the holding deposit can be held, therefore retained by the agent for the landlord. The other deposit I mentioned is of course the security deposit. Now this has always been equivalent to 6 weeks rent, but it now reduces if the rent per annum is no more than £50,000, and in that case the security deposit only has to amount to 5 weeks rent, whereas if the rent is over £50,000 per annum, then 6 weeks rent can be taken as the security deposit. So that's the outline of the benefits to the tenants of this new fee ban that's come in. So it's good news for them, but unfortunately somebody has to bear these costs, and it's not such good news for the landlord or his agent. So if you're a landlord, expect to hear from your agent, who has got to decide how best to cover the cost of referencing, irrespective of whether the applicant becomes the tenant or not. The agent or the landlord has to bear the cost of all those references being taken up, all of the cost of the tenancy agreement being drawn up, and all of the cost of an inventory being made, checked in and checked out. So those are fairly sizable costs depending on which agency is used to prepare the documents, take up the references, and of course carry out the inventory. And some agents may well decide that they need to increase their fee chargeable to the landlord in order to recover the costs that they are now having to pay. Now if it's 1 or 2% more than their average letting fee or fully managed fee, then that could have a knock-on effect on what the landlord needs to, or feels that he needs to, charge in the way of rent in order to recover the costs of the higher fee being charged by the agent. If that puts his rent higher than the average for his type of property in the local area, he may find it harder to find a tenant, because a tenant is going to go for a lower rent if it suits their purposes, rather than paying a premium for not very different type of property to the one that he could take for less. So that's something for the landlords to bear in mind, and the agents would be probably better, if I may say so, in negotiating with the landlord which expenses he is prepared to cover as the agent and which costs he is asking the landlord to bear. So the agent might say, well, I will take on the referencing costs irrespective of whether anybody rents as a result of them, and we could share the tenancy agreement costs if you, the landlord, would kindly pay for the check-out as well as the check-in and the inventory make. So it's going to be a hit for the agent, it's going to be a hit for the landlord, but it does generate a fairer atmosphere, in my view, and environment for the tenants to be able to go ahead and take the property, and for the agent to collect their commission and the landlord to receive his rent. So that's the way things are likely to pan out, in my view. If you'd like to contact us for more information about your particular circumstances, please feel free to do so. In the meantime, I hope this has been useful for you, and please tune in again, because I'm going to be talking about other subjects in due course. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.